पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज खुले, कुछ हमने खुद खोले और काफी सारे हमारे खिलाफ खोले गए। आज के महाज बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम, अस्सलाम वालेकुम। मैं हूं वजाहत सईद खान। आज के महाज मुश्किल वक्त के नाम। मुश्किल वक्त आ गया है आसिम मुनीर साहब पे, एंड इट्स नॉट वेरी क्लियर कि ये कैसे रिएक्ट कर रहे हैं। कल हमने जब ये स्टोरी आपके लिए ब्रेक की थी कि आसिम मुनीर साहब पे सैंक्शंस, स्पेसिफिकली इन पे सैंक्शंस लग रही हैं और इनके इर्द गिर्द उन लोगों पे अमेरिका की तरफ से शायद सैंक्शंस लगे जो इनकी मदद करते हैं पाकिस्तान के जमहूरी जो तकाजे हैं उनको रोज तोड़ने में, जलाने में, उनकी बेहुरमती करने में। तो मैं उम्मीद कर रहा था कि 24 घंटे बल्कि अब 36 घंटे होने वाले हैं। मैं उम्मीद कर रहा था कि कोई रिएक्शन आएगा। मैं उम्मीद कर रहा था कि शायद ISPR कुछ बोले। मैं उम्मीद कर रहा था कि शायद फॉरेन ऑफिस कुछ बोले। मैं उम्मीद कर रहा था कि शायद इवन हमारा मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया शायद कुछ लिखे, मगर ऐसा नहीं हुआ। मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया क्यों चुप है? फौज क्यों चुप है? एग्जैक्टली क्या हो रहा है? आज इस पे आते हैं। एंड वेरी इंपॉर्टेंटली आज हम वाशिंगटन की तरफ चलते हैं, वही शहर जिधर से ये सैंक्शंस ड्राफ्ट हुई हैं। वाशिंगटन में एक स्पेशलिस्ट हमें लाइव ज्वाइन करेंगे, हमें बताएंगे कि एग्जैक्टली अब क्या होना है, इन सैंक्शंस के साथ क्या मूड है। और ऑफ कोर्स और भी चीजें वाशिंगटन में हो रही हैं, जैसे अफगानिस्तान की तरफ उन्होंने अपने बंदे भेजे हैं। अफगानिस्तान के साथ, तालिबान के साथ अमेरिकी क्या कर रहे हैं? पाकिस्तान को डंडा दे रहे हैं, अफगानिस्तान को प्यार कर रहे हैं। क्या हो रहा है? ये है आज का मास। शेयर, लाइक, सब्सक्राइब, कमेंट करना जरूर भूलिएगा नहीं, बिकॉज ईद आने वाली है। 5 लाख तक मैंने सब्सक्राइबर्स अपने करने हैं, आपने मेरी मदद करनी है। मेरा नाम वजाहत सईद खान है, मैं एक इंडिपेंडेंट सहाफी हूँ, न्यूयॉर्क में बेस्ड हूँ। लेट्स स्टार्ट। ये हमने कल आपको दिखाया था, ये वो रेजोल्यूशन का पहला सफा है जो आसिम मुनीर के खिलाफ दर्ज अब कर दी गई है, मगर सिर्फ दर्ज हुई है, अभी तक पास नहीं हुई। ये हमने आपको कल दिखाया था। ये वो शख्स है जिसने एक ब्रीफिंग दी थी एग्जैक्टली 2 महीने पहले कांग्रेस को। मैंने, मेरे और दोस्तों ने, मुईद पीरजादा वगैरह, मलका समदानी ने ब्रीफिंग दी थी, मगर मैंने डिमांड किया था कि सैंक्शंस लगनी चाहिए। अब वो सैंक्शंस का लिटरली लगनी शुरू हो गई हैं, मगर इसमें सिर्फ मेरा मौकिफ नहीं है, पूरा एक इकोसिस्टम है। उसमें अलग अलग डायस्पोरा की ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस हैं, कुछ प्रो PTI हैं, कुछ इंडिपेंडेंट हैं जो इससे मुंसलिक हैं, जिन्होंने किया है। ये वो शख्स है जिसने मेन बिल को ऑथर किया है। साउथ कैरोलिना, अमरीकी जनूब की एक रियासत है, उसका ये जो है कांग्रेसमैन है। ये 2 बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट कमेटियों पे बैठता है। जो फौजियों की कमेटी है, आर्म सर्विसेज कमेटी, उस पे बैठता है, और जो फॉरेन रिलेशंस कमेटी है उस पे बैठता है। इसका नाम जो विल्सन है। इसने पिछले साल डंडा भी दिया था डोनाल्ड लू को पाकिस्तान के लिए। ये दूसरा बंदा है जिसने उस सैंक्शंस के बिल को स्पॉन्सर किया है। इसका नाम जेमी पनेटा है। ये CIA चीफ लियोन पनेटा का बेटा है। इसने भी फौज में काम किया हुआ है, विल्सन ने भी काम किया हुआ है। ये डेमोक्रेट है, विल्सन रिपब्लिकन है। इसका मतलब है कि दोनों जमातों के दोनों जो नेशनल सिक्योरिटी विंग्स हैं वो दोनों इकट्ठे हो गए हैं इस मुहिम के लिए। ये बंदा है, ये सॉर्ट ऑफ बीच का है, ये एक लिबरल डेमोक्रेट है, टेक्सास का डेमोक्रेट है। टेक्सास में बहुत सारे पाकिस्तानी हैं। ये भी इस मुहिम को लीड कर रहा है। ये वो लेजिस्लेशन है जो ऑलरेडी अंडरवे है। कहा जा रहा है कि इस लेजिस्लेशन के अंदर ये जो नेशनल डिफेंस ऑथराइजेशन एक्ट है, इसमें ये जो बिल है ये डाल देंगे और फिर ये बिल पास हो जाएगा। ये वो शख्स है जो इसको पास करेगा। इसने ऑलरेडी पाकिस्तान के हक में, माइक रॉजर्स ने ऑलरेडी पाकिस्तान के हक में, पिछली गर्मियों में इमरान खान के हक में, जमहूरियत के हक में, इलेक्शंस के प्रोब करने के हक में ऑलरेडी इसने बात की हुई है। इसने वोट दिया हुआ है। ये उसका नंबर 2 है, दूसरी पार्टी का, डेमोक्रेट पार्टी का। इसने भी पाकिस्तान के हक में वोट डाला हुआ है। और अब होना क्या है? होना यह है कि जैसे और दीगर फौजियों पे, जैसे ये सूडान का जर्नैल है, जैसे ये ईरान का जर्नैल था, जैसे ये म्यांमार का जर्नैल है, इन सब पे सैंक्शंस लगी हुई हैं। और शायद अब आसिम मुनीर पे सैंक्शंस लगे, मगर कैसे लगेंगी? इंट्रोड्यूस हो गया, दर्ज हो गया बिल, रिव्यू होगा पहले, फिर उस पर डिबेट होगी, फिर उस पर वोट होगा कांग्रेस में, जो इनका लोअर हाउस है, नेशनल असेंबली आप कह सकते हैं, इनका पार्लियामान है। फिर सेनेट जो उनका अपर हाउस है, उधर भी यही होगा। रिव्यू होगा, डिबेट होगी, वोट होगा, फिर रेकंसिलिएशन होगी, जो फर्क है दोनों डॉक्यूमेंट्स में, और फिर सदर साहब के पास जाएगा। लंबा प्रोसीजर है, मगर शुरू हो गया। पाकिस्तान में क्या हाल है? अब दूसरा दिन हो गया है, आपका मेन स्ट्रीम मीडिया जिसके लिए आप रोज 15-20 रुपए का जो आपने अखबार लगाया हुआ है, उसको अपना 15-20 रुपए को आप बचाएं, क्योंकि ये झूठा है। 2 दिन हो गए हैं, पाकिस्तान के सबसे 3 बड़े अखबारों ने ये खबर अभी तक नहीं चलाई। पाकिस्तान के सबसे, आप कह सकते हैं, कंट्रोवर्शियल और पावरफुल आदमी ने इस वक्त उसके ऊपर सैंक्शंस लगने लग गई हैं, और लोकल मीडिया का ये हाल है। कोई खबर नहीं एक्सप्रेस ट्रिब्यून में, कोई खबर नहीं डॉन में, कोई खबर नहीं इनका जो जहेज में आया हुआ है आजकल इनके साथ जंग वालों का, द न्यूज। जस्ट इमेजिन। मगर खबर हमारे पास है। वी हैव द इनसाइड ट्रैक, और मेरे साथ आज इस इनसाइड ट्रैक को का हिसाब बराबर करने के लिए, आपको अल्टीमेटली बेस्ट तरीके से इन्फॉर्म्ड रखने के लिए हम वॉशिंगटन से माइकल कुगलमन को लाए हैं। माइकल कुगलमन is the director of the South Asia Institute at the Wilson Center. He writes a fantastic weekly briefing for Foreign Policy magazine, which is one of the best newspapers of record regarding foreign policy. And his briefing is a must read if you are a student of South Asia. Mike is also a dear friend, and Mike is also my go-to guy when it comes to understanding Washington. Our interview is going to be in English. इसका बाद में मैं कोशिश करूंगा तर्जुमा करूं. Share, like, subscribe, follow Mike at Michael Kugelman on Twitter. He's very popular there. I would say he's even more popular than me on Twitter sometimes. Hey, Mike. Hi. How you doing?
That's high praise. Thank you. Good to be back here with you, Waj.
Good. Okay. So we're going to talk about your foreign policy South Asia briefing in just a bit. You're going to give us a preview on that, a sneak peek, because it's supposed to come out on Wednesday, but we're going to circle back to that. But 24 hours have passed, Mr. Kugelman, for Pakistan's most powerful man to be effectively all facing sanctions, a bipartisan bill, co-sponsored by both sides of the national security wings of both parties in these great United States, and backed, of course, by a lot of liberal and progressive elements as well. I've sort of told my audiences that this is just the beginning. It's a long process: review, vote, debate. Review, vote, debate, reconciliation eventually goes to the White House. There's a long way forward, and only as far as sanctions effectivity is concerned, only 50%, according to some studies, only 50% of the time are these sanctions effective. But give me your worldview on from Washington. What's happening, and why do you think the Pakistanis haven't responded yet? Not even in the newspapers. Nothing from ISPR. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that many in Pakistan are banking on the hope that the bill will not pass, and quite frankly, I think there's good reason to believe it will not pass. We could get into that, but it has gotten some attention. Anwar Iqbal, the longtime Washington correspondent for Dawn, he published a piece earlier ago about the bill. There was a news article, and the Pakistani embassy did not comment for the article, according to Anwar. But look, I think that we have to step back for a second and acknowledge that this is a huge, huge development for symbolic purposes. I cannot remember. I mean, there's been a lot of legislation here in Washington over the years focused on Pakistan, but I cannot remember a single time when you had a bill that was introduced that called for sanctions to be imposed on the Pakistan Army chief. So I think that for that reason alone, this is really significant. And as I said on X the other day, for that reason, I think it's going to unnerve the civilian and certainly the military leadership in Pakistan. But you look at what's been happening in Pakistan over the last few days since ISPR announced that Pakistan is a hard state. The suggestion or the implication was that meant that Pakistan was going to crack down really hard on the bad guys, on BLA, on terrorists, and so on. But we've seen it go even further than that, in the sense that, as I think you might have alluded to before, several Pakistani journalists have been taken over the last 24 hours or so. Marang Baloch, of course, was arrested over the weekend. So this is happening, and of course, the bill was passed on Monday. And I go back to what I said right at the top. I think that that Pakistan doesn't really think that much is going to come with this bill. I don't think that they're concerned that there could actually be a possibility that things could get to a point where the army chief would have to worry about sanctions. And I think that's an accurate, I do not expect the bill to pass, but you could call it what you will, But I think this is a case of the Pakistani leadership, the military leadership, trying to make a strong statement with this hard state stuff, and they're not going to be bothered by what's happened in Washington with this legislation, even though clearly a lot of concern about it.
Okay, so this is interesting to debate, right? We're at an interesting point. On the one hand, you're saying that this is unprecedented. Specific sanctions, Magnitsky sanctions, Asim Munir's name particularly highlighted with references like he knowingly is doing this. He's knowingly targeting Imran Khan. He's knowingly suppressing human rights in Pakistan. And that his name we're clear about, according to the bill, but other names need to be identified and put in. Then there's, of course, the machinations of how long the U.S. government, the White House administration, et cetera, will have. That's the boring bit. But this is interesting. You're saying that this bill doesn't have a chance of going through. But on the other hand, Mike, you're saying that this bill is just the fact that it's been tabled is unprecedented. These are two contradictory statements. The very fact that we've gotten here is interesting, to say the least. Why do you think this bill won't go through? What do the Pakistanis have in their back pocket that they're doubling down? They're still going ahead arresting people. They've arrested at least two more journalists today. There's Waheed Murad from yesterday. There is another Professor Taimur from Lahore. He's been picked up. There's, of course, Ahmed Noorani's brothers who were picked up last week when he did that story. There's Farhan Malik from Karachi who's been picked up. The list goes on. They're doubling down. And on the other hand, you're saying this is unprecedented. So what do you know that I don't know? What do the Pakistani military people know that we don't know?
Well, how could I possibly know anything that you don't? No, I think that I don't see these as two inconsistent or contradictory statements. I think that if you just look at the very simple fact that we're looking at an unprecedented development, the fact that this bill has been introduced, even if it doesn't pass, that doesn't take away from the fact that it's very significant, even if only in a symbolic sense. But getting to the other issue as to the fate of the bill, I don't want to make any guarantees. Who knows? Maybe it will go through. But why I'm skeptical? I mean, there's several factors, right? One is that, and I think you have a number of members who are very, what I would consider hawks on counterterrorism. And given what what played out in recent weeks when America looked to Pakistan to help apprehend an ISK terrorist that the Americans really wanted, I think that it's a reminder to a number of members that Pakistan and really the Pakistani military, Pakistani intelligence can be helpful to the U.S. to help it achieve some of its limited counterterrorism goals. And I think that might then trigger a realization as well that Pakistan's military can be helpful in other ways too. I know we may get to this in just a minute. Just recently, one of the few Americans still being held by the Taliban in Afghanistan was released. Maybe there'd be a view that Pakistan could potentially be helpful, even if indirectly, in that type of context too. So that's one reason why I think that
Sure.
a number of members may be unwilling to go through with this. Another thing is if you look at the others, if you look at some of the more progressive members of the House and in Congress, may be a bit uncomfortable about a bill that involves sanctions, not necessarily targeted sanctions, ones that target specific individuals, but a bill that, in the case of this one, is a bit vague as to who else beyond the army chief would be targeted by sanctions. I think it talks about, individuals or those that have served in a leadership role related to government or military in Pakistan. They could be targeted. It's a bit vague, and I think there's some members that would not want to be in a position where they're signing on to a bill that people that don't deserve to be sanctioned could be. Again, this is just speculation.
Sure. I mean, and we are at that speculative point. This is what we know, and this is what we don't know, though, so far. We know that this is unprecedented, and we know that Asim Munir has been named and shamed for doing terrible things in this bill. That's new. The Americans have worked with a lot of dictators in the past, Mike. You've got all those books behind you which testify to that. From Ayub Khan to Yahya Khan to Zia to Musharraf to all the generals since then to this guy. So there's been a long history to support what you're saying, that there's a huge chunk of the U.S. national security establishment which says, we need to work with these guys. They might be not the nicest guys, but they're important people in this part of the world. And we need them to be on the right side, on our right side. There might be terrible, evil generals, but hey, we need to support these guys. I get it. But here's what's also interesting. What's interesting is that this man does represent that part, that national security wing of his party. The fact is that on the other side of the aisle, this man does represent that very same national security wing of the country. If it was just these guys, for example, it was just, I don't know, it was just the Greg Kazars of the world, the liberal, progressive, woke types, I'd get it. But it's not just him. He hasn't led this. And the very fact is that where this is going next is very interesting as well. It's going to Mike Rogers. He's voted for that HR Resolution 901. If it gets to the House Services Committee, if they decide to go through the NDAA Act, if it gets to this guy on the other side of the aisle, he too, Adam Smith, has also voted for HR Resolution 901. I'm not challenging what you're saying, nor is history. But what's interesting to debate here is that because this is unprecedented, this is a new moment, can we have the same, I don't know, math to apply that, oh, the national security wings of both parties will eventually come in and give the Pakistani military a break? I don't think so. We're at a new stand. So maybe the old math doesn't apply. I'm not trying to be hopeful about sanctions. I don't think anybody should be sanctioned. I think people should back away and govern carefully. But when push comes to shove, a message needs to go out, and it seems like it's going out.
No, absolutely. And I would just say to this briefly that this is, I think, a wake-up call. I think that the resolution that was passed last year, last June, the one that passed by an overwhelming margin, supporting Pakistani democracy, condemning election rigging and all that, that was a wake-up call as well. But this is a different type of wake-up call, just because the potential ramifications of this bill are so much greater. And when I say it's a wake-up call for those in charge in Pakistan. But absolutely, no matter what happens from this point on, that wake-up call is very much there. But what I would say is that you got a lot of members, and they don't all think alike, and they don't all necessarily all think as the two co-sponsors do, as the two sponsors do. So we'll see. But one other point I would make is that it is notable that this bill would call for the army chief to be sanctioned within 180 days after it's enacted. That's actually a lot of time, right? That's what, 6 months? I'm not a mathematician. So that 6 months could also be critical. So that to me suggests that the bill is trying to offer a bit of an inducement, I don't know, something that if it were to pass, that there would still be time, ample time for the Pakistanis to try to change conditions such as free Khan and things like that, that could then lead to a situation where the sanctions would be waived. So I think that's important. It's not instant. These sanctions wouldn't be applied the moment the bill is passed. Right?
Sure, but I mean, the Congress isn't running a free Imran Khan hashtag anytime soon, right? We understand that, but the very fact is that we both agree that this is unprecedented. Is well, I guess that's
absolutely,
that's a good place to rest this argument on. But Mike, you and I will keep on talking about the next moves in Washington about this. Speaking of next moves, this is fun too. We need to bring this guy in the mix now. This is happening on the other side of the border. Zalmay Khalilzad, not a fan of the Pakistani establishment, never has been, never will be. Ex-envoy for the previous administrations. He's worked with more than a couple of administrations, since Bush, since Obama, since Trump. I guess you can say he's the man with the inside track on the Taliban, and that's why he's got bipartisan support. He's gone to Kabul behind what was seen by the Pakistanis behind their back, and sort of directly connected with the tangos, as U.S. Mill and Pak Mill calls them. And he's broken bread with them. He's managed the release of an American prisoner. He's even managed to take off a pretty big bounty of Sirajuddin Haqqani's head. So the Pakistanis feel, some members of the intelligence community there feel a little redundant right now. The Americans are talking directly via a guy who doesn't really like the Pakistanis to the Taliban. What's going on here? What's your read on this from Washington?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, I mean, it's very notable that that Khalilzad and also the Trump administration's hostage envoy Adam Boulder, that they actually were physically in Kabul. I mean, this is the first time that we know of that there have been, in the case of Bowler, a U.S. official in Afghanistan since the Taliban came back to power. That's really significant. But the Pakistan dimension here, I push back. There's been some debate on this in social media. I don't think this is anything new in the sense that since the Taliban came to power, the U.S. government has engaged directly with the Taliban. They met. There were 2 days of meetings in Doha during the Biden administration back in 2023. I believe Tom West met with several Taliban leaders. They've negotiated previous prisoner release deals. This didn't involve Pakistan's role either. And keep in mind, this is forgotten a lot, that soon after the Taliban came back, I think November 2021, the Biden administration announced that that Qatar would be essentially representing U.S. interests in Afghanistan, and the Qataris have been very involved in these hostage negotiations, including the one that just resulted in this case recently. So, I think that Pakistan has really not been a part of this story from the start, quite frankly. So I think that from the time U.S. forces left Afghanistan, the Taliban came back to power, I think there's been a view in the Biden administration and now in the Trump administration that you don't necessarily need to work with Pakistan when it comes to engaging with Kabul. Not to say there's no need to engage with Pakistan at all, as we see when there's a terrorist in Pakistan that the U.S. wants apprehended, Pakistan could be helpful. But when it comes to Taliban engagement, I think this has been a pretty consistent story for the last 2 years. So I don't see what happened in Kabul in recent days with Khalilzad going there, that represents something new that the U.S. is turning away from Pakistan. I think this is not a new story.
Okay, but if you really scale back to some of the literature which has been happening, which has been released, I really want to share this. I thought this was a fantastic graph. Came out a couple of weeks ago. This is the Global Terror Index, and Mike, this is for nerds like you and me. This is so much fun. This is the foreign influence in Afghanistan graph, right? Now I don't know how they track it, but it's so much fun to read, right? This is the GTI's assessment of 5 countries with the greatest influence in Afghanistan. Now, America's influence has dipped, as you can see, which is just around 2020 because, well, the Americans are gone, right? But as you can also see, the Indians have still the Russians are here, the Indians are here, the Uzbekistanis are here, the Pakistanis are here. Guess what? According to this, the Pakistanis have less influence than the Americans, the Indians, and even the Russians at this current moment in Afghanistan. What does that say to you about the Pakistani footprint, Pakistani influence, and about your argument before that, the Pakistanis may be helpful? Because the Pakistanis don't seem to have, at least according to this, and frankly, even the state of things on the border with the TTP or otherwise, the Pakistanis don't seem to have much of a sway with the Taliban. So people are diverting the Pakistanis and going their own way. What do you make of that?
Yeah, thanks. Well, putting that chart up is a reminder that I need to get my eyes checked. It's going to be a while to focus, but I was finally able to read it. Thank you. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly what's meant by influence here, but I think broadly speaking, it suggests to me that money talks, right? I mean, America was providing the most money and the arms. Weapons talk too. Right. Pakistan was not playing that type of role, but no, Pakistan was highly influential. I mean, it was sponsoring the Taliban, it was sheltering the Taliban, it was providing them with all types of support. But no, I think that this gets to broader issues about Pakistan's challenges that it's faced in Afghanistan for many years, and that includes public perceptions in Afghanistan of Pakistanis have always lagged behind public perceptions of India, and India had been a very significant provider of development support for many years. That helps shape public perceptions, and that could contribute to this for sure. But I don't think it would be fair. I think Pakistan was influential in certain ways. It was influential in terms of how it shaped the trajectory of the insurgency and the war, right? But if we're talking about influence on, I don't know, public policy in Afghanistan, that type of thing, I think it was pretty influential there as well.
Hey, man. You're the specialist, but as the journalist, I just see other people stepping into a place where the Pakistanis cannot. I see Zalmay
Yeah.
going in there. I see the Vikram Misri of the Indian Foreign Secretary meeting with
Right.
Turkey. I
Oh
see
yeah.
the Indians sending a tech team over there for the last couple of years. I see the Indians even allowing the Taliban to set up a special envoy in Delhi. I mean, come on. It just
Yeah,
seems
yeah, absolutely. And I
Pakistan
think
being outmaneuvered.
right. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that this graphic to me would make more sense if it was tracking influence from 2021 to the present. I agree. Pakistan has lost significant amounts of influence, and that's because it's lost leverage. There's no war going on, so its utility to the Taliban no longer is there, or at least not as much. And we've seen that India has scaled up ties with the Taliban in a big way, and
Yeah.
very slowly other regional players are starting to move in. China, Iran. The Russians have always been hanging around in the Central Asian states, particularly Uzbekistan. And Pakistan, its own relations with the Taliban, of course, have really struggled of late. So, yeah, I think talking about now, Pakistani influence has receded in Afghanistan in a big way. But if you go back to the warriors, it was a much different story.
Okay, Mike, last question. Really important, really critical. Balochistan, home province, very touchy subject. So you better bring your big guns on. Why is the military not doing what any government at this point would do? Reach out to the opposition, reach out to the activists, negotiate, sit them down, hear them out. Say, listen, there's been a huge tragedy. Let's talk. Let's take a pause. Why are they doubling down on this hard state narrative? Arresting Marung Baloch, arresting her deputies, people still disappearing, total crackdown in Balochistan after the Jafar Express debacle. Instead of scaling back, they're really doubling down and pushing forward. Why do you think this is happening?
And I think the issue is that you have a group like the BLA and others that I would describe as terrorist groups. The U.S. government does as well, and they have been targeting the Pakistani military relentlessly and increasingly over the last few years. And of course, the Jafar Express attack, you had large numbers of troops, Pakistani troops on that train. So there's a lot of anger there, and I think that added to that, you have activists in Balochistan, peaceful activists that really, in my view, they have the same grievances that the militants do, which is not surprising, right? I mean, this is all about the fact that Balochistan has been marginalized. It's been, it's been victimized by this resource exploitation. You've had, the military engaging in violent activities in Balochistan for many years. So I think that it's very difficult for leaders in Pakistan to separate, unfortunately, the terrorists, the BLA, from these peaceful activists. But there's no other answer, quite frankly. For years, we've seen the same strategy play out many times over the last few decades of using force, and it doesn't work. And we've seen that Baluch separatist violence over the last year, it went up by about almost 120%, according
Yep.
to PIPS, right? So yeah, and I think that it's just very difficult for the leadership right now, particularly when emotions are still raw from the recent train attack, to think about doing this any differently. But I hope that cooler heads will prevail eventually.
Yeah, I don't know if heads are cool right now, Mike. Our friend over here thinks that the hard state is the new normal. In fact, there's a harden the state committee which has been formed, which has now met a couple of times. It's a ridiculous concept to have a committee like that, an actual functioning arm of the government, which actually says, yeah, let's just pick up more people. Let's just arrest more people. Let's just crack down even harder. And the very fact that they're so not creative, the very fact that they're actually calling it a harden the state committee is a little embarrassing. It's a little cringe. It's a little shameful. What do you think of that committee, Mike? What would
Yeah,
you
one
name
could.
it? What would you name your harden the state committee?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I'm sure this has been the cause. This could spark many memes and all kinds of unfortunate jokes as well. But yeah, no, I think it's in some ways I can understand why they're going in this direction, just because there's this view that the military specifically is under assault from these actors, and you've got anti-state actors that are starting to merge, and you've got different Baluch separatist groups now working together. You've got the BLA working with the TTP, and most of these attacks are targeting security forces. But clearly, this is not the way to respond. And I published a piece recently when I made a very obvious point. Killing insurgents is not going to kill insurgency. Killing terrorists is
Brilliant.
not going to kill terrorism. But
Brilliant.
yeah.
Mike Kugelman. My man from Washington. Thank you, Mike, for keeping us honest, giving us the inside scoop on how DC is thinking. We will have you back on soon, right before your next foreign policy brief, which I'm looking forward to reading tonight. That's all the time we have. I'm going to let you go. Have a great day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That was Mike Kugelman from DC, director of the Wilson Center. What did he say? Well, I don't have the time to translate all of that in Urdu, but what I do have time to tell you is share, like, subscribe, comment, follow Mike at Mike Kugelman, follow us. This is independent media doing what it's supposed to do, inform you where others don't. My name is Wajahat Saeed Khan. I wish you a very good day ahead. I will talk to you very soon. Take care. Pakistan. पाकिस्तान के खिलाफ बहुत सारे महाज